unmute, unmute, unmute. Stop. Streaming is challenge. Huh?
You there?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm ready to go.
Hello. Hi everyone. Welcome to Greenomix World webinar. Very good evening and whatever the time. So today, currently we are having around 125 people who have registered, and more sign-ups are coming. We have people from, as per the statistics, from different countries, from Africa, India, from Southeast Asia, few from the Europe and the USA. Welcome everyone to Greenomix World webinar today. So today we are going to discuss on from a solar airplane to 1,000 clean and profitable solutions to protect the environment. This is going to be a wonderful discussion today. Let's know a little bit about Solar Impulse. So I think it's a buzz. Everybody knows about Solar Impulse being more than a mission, all the time, always creating solutions that protect the environment in a profitable way. Today through this webinar, we have our guest, Mr. Willem from Solar Impulse, who is looking after the investor relations. And he is going to talk about, give a little bit idea about the Solar Impulse Foundation, its activities, info on business of creating solutions that protect the environment, and then bringing together protection of environment and financially viable solutions, and giving them recognition as well as funding options. Then how these ideas can impact the business. These are the few topics which Mr. Willem today will be explaining to us. Then just to talk a little bit about Willem van Asset. He's a Dutch national, currently associated with Solar Impulse, having his having lived his life across the world, particularly in Asia, and speaks English, Dutch, French, German, and Mandarin. So welcome, Willem, to the webinar today. Very much welcome. And he is currently managing the investor relations for the World Alliance for Effective Solutions and initiative of the Solar Impulse Foundation, and more of a sustainable professional, works for the climate change. So welcome, Willem, to the Greenomix World webinar studio today. And today he's going to explain. From here I'll ask Willem to share his screen and start his presentation to the whole audience. And at the end, I'll ask all the viewers today to put their questions in the platform, so that I can direct all the questions and queries to Willem at the end, after he presents the whole idea of 1,000 clean and profitable solutions to protect the environment. Thank you. And Willem, can you just start sharing your presentation and speak on it? Welcome to the webinar platform.
Thank you, Ashish, for this fantastic introduction. And I'm sharing my screen as we speak. I hope that it's visible. Is that all good? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
And can you see the screen?
Yes, it's now
Great.
visible. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for your introduction. And so, as you said, I'm now working for the Solar Impulse Foundation, which is an initiative that's close to my heart, something I'm very passionate about, and I'm really excited about the opportunity to be able to share it with you. So thank you all for making the time available to share in this initiative, because I believe it's something that the more support it gets, the better world we can achieve together. And so today I'd like to speak to you about this project that was a solar airplane and that moved towards sourcing 1,000 clean and profitable solutions, and essentially our mission to lead the world to clean profitability. So as Ashis mentioned, I think a lot of people are aware of Solar Impulse. If you're not, then you may have heard about the solar airplane that went around the world in 2015, 2016, which was an absolute first for energy and aviation. And achieving this was our founder, Bertrand Piccard. Bertrand Piccard, who is an adventurer and pioneer and also ambassador for clean technologies. And at this point, I just want to, without going into the details of the project of the airplane, first, I just want to take a step back and imagine that you are flying in a cockpit by yourself on the Pacific Ocean, and there's no noise because you are being propelled by clean, efficient technologies, by propellers that do not make any noise, no pollution, and you look around you, you're actually cruising at a fairly slow speed. It's only about 70 kilometers an hour, which is about, as fast as a car can drive. And as you can see on the picture, Bertrand is even handing out his selfie stick. I mean, it's probably one of the few possibilities of making a selfie whilst flying an airplane. And all to go and say that it's, quite a remarkable situation. And whilst he was flying over the Pacific, he asked himself the question, wow, am I actually living science fiction? Am I now in the future? And actually, the realization is no, I'm not. I'm in the present. The solutions that are powering this airplane, that are fueling the batteries, the battery technologies, the lightweight materials that have been designed and innovated to make this airplane fly are all existing, and there's so many more out there. It's the rest of the world that's living in the past using technologies that are 130 years old, which is, if you come to think of it, pretty ridiculous. And especially because these solutions, they are maybe ecological solutions, but they also create jobs, they generate profit, they attract investment, they essentially, encourage clean economic growth, but economic growth nonetheless. So these solutions are not only ecological, they're simply logical to implement. And this is really the message that the Solar Impulse plane was carrying around the world. So what do we do next? After flying around the world, and not carrying passengers, okay, fine, one pilot, but not a very practical solution was the plane. It was really an idealistic, a symbolic solution. It was time to really, put the money where our mouth is and go search for those solutions that exist out there. Because the solutions that exist around the world today allow us to cut carbon emissions by half if we were to implement them right now, right here. But we don't, because people like to stick to their habits, because there are lobbies in place, because people don't know where to find these solutions. Or very often the question is, yeah, but isn't it way too expensive? I don't have the means to do this. I don't have the funds. And this is very much at the heart of the mission of the Solar Impulse Foundation, is to prove to the world how profitable the protection of the environment has actually become to date. And in order to do that, we decided to launch the challenge to find 1,000 solutions that are at the same time economically profitable, but also have a positive impact on the environment. So we are looking for solutions with these three criteria that you see on the screen. The technological feasibility, whether it's actually scalable and possible, the economic profitability, whether there's a business model behind it and you can actually make a profit with it. It doesn't have to be now, it can be in the future. It just has to be an economically viable model. And then, of course, is it environmentally responsible, and also are there socioeconomic benefits? Because if it's good for the planet, but it's way too expensive for the consumer, it's also not going to work. So all these socioeconomic benefits are also taken into account. And then if you say, okay, let's find 1,000 solutions, how do we actually decide that they answer these 3 criteria? So that's why we decided to create a label, the first label that really focuses on both the environment and the profitability. And so we've come to put together a panel of independent experts from around the world, from universities and institutional entities, who engage themselves to review these solutions in their own time and assess them on the 3 criteria that I mentioned before. And it's by doing this assessment very thoroughly, by at least two experts per solution, and getting the sufficient average grade that you actually get accredited the solar impulse efficient solution. But why get this label? Because ultimately, getting this label brings you into that portfolio of 1,000 solutions. And with that portfolio, we are going to influence the decision makers around the world to take more ambitious climate and energy policies. But in doing so, we've also brought together so many entrepreneurs and innovators in this world, and we're starting to build up an ecosystem. In fact, we have the ambition to build the largest clean tech ecosystem in the world, which we entitled the World Alliance for Efficient Solutions, and which doesn't only bring together these startups or companies or corporates that have solutions to innovate, but also brings together investors that want to finance these solutions, and also seekers, solution seekers who need to implement solutions in their supply chain, in their municipalities, in their cities, in their regions, in their countries, whatever it may be. If they are looking for a solution, we are hoping that we can bring it to them. And so you can see that the idea is to federate these different actors who have aligned against climate change, and to actually show how much we can do by collaborating together. So that's the World Alliance for Efficient Solutions. And if you see our network today, we started opening this alliance in the beginning of this year. And actually within about 6 months, we already gathered 1,200 members from across the world. We do have quite a lot in Europe, but we are reaching out to places like China and Australia and North America and Africa and South America to really make people understand that you can join this alliance. And by the way, it's completely free. There's no membership fees. It's all about joining a movement and doing work together to make a better world. And so ultimately, this is what I said. It's about taking these solutions around the world and showing the decision makers that they actually can be much more ambitious in their energy targets and environmental policies. It's not only the political decision makers at an international level, but at a national level, at a local level, and also in industry. And you think, okay, why can we actually go to the United Nations and go to heads of states and show them these portfolios? What right do we have? What right of passage do we have to do this? And how are we able to do that? And how are we able to get corporate companies to give us money to actually do this, give us a mandate because they believe in the job that we're doing and they would like to be a part of it and associate themselves with it? It's because we need to take a small step back and look at where the legacy of Bertrand Piccard actually comes from. It's pioneering spirit that started over 100 years ago. If you go back to the grandfather of the initiator of our foundation, his name was Auguste Piccard, and he was a famous Swiss physicist. He's actually the first person who went into the stratosphere and the first person in humanity who saw the curvature of the Earth with his naked eye. And he really paved the way for modern aviation, because when he went into the stratosphere, he did so with the first ever pressurized capsule, which was the first prototype of the pressurized cabin that we use today, every day, to fly around the world. So that was true innovation. And he put that to use to make a submarine entitled the Bathyscaphe, which his son, Jacques, used to go to the deepest point of the ocean on Earth, known as the Mariana Trench in the Pacific Ocean. And he was the first person that was able to show that there was life at the bottom of the ocean, and actually an instrumental piece of information and argument to convince the United States government not to dump nuclear waste at the bottom of the ocean. And when Bertrand Piccard grew up, he thought of himself as coming too late to this world because there was nothing anymore to be achieved and discovered because everything had been done. People have gone to the moon, people have gone to the bottom of the ocean, they've gone into the stratosphere, and yet he found a new challenge, which was to fly in a hot air balloon around the world. And he was actually the first with his companion Brian Jones to fly non-stop around the world, winning this race from Richard Branson. And it's when he landed in the Egyptian desert after 20 days of flight that he only had a fraction of the fuel left to propel him into the air, that he realized how dependent he was on the fossil fuels that were making him fly in this hot air balloon. And he said, the next time I go around the world, I do it without any fuel at all. And that's how the Solar Impulse idea was born, to create a solar airplane that could not fly only on solar energy, but that could fly on solar energy day and night, and therefore in perpetuity, potentially. A lot of people told him he was crazy. Nobody was going to help him. He talked to the CEO of Boeing, who said, he said, are you going to help me? The guy answered, of course not, because we need to protect our status quo, right? We need to protect our industries. Why disrupt them if we can live off them right now? There's no need to change. So he turned to other parties and worked very hard with the Polytechnical University of Lausanne and found sponsoring money in different industries and managed to do a feasibility study. And slowly but surely, this project became a reality. And then prototypes came out, and then the first flights happened, and then the first 24-hour flight happened. And then a lot of people in the aviation industry started realizing that perhaps this was actually possible. And it's only when he managed to go around the world, I have to admit, it was not a non-stop flight. That was something that came out very clearly from the feasibility study. Also because the airplane is so light and moves so slowly that you can see that, for example, the longest flight was from Nagoya to Hawaii. It took about 5 days. Can you imagine that you are 5 days by yourself in a cockpit using hypnosis and meditation and yoga to keep yourself focused, and doing mini power naps of maximum 20 minutes, being woken up by the central control mission in Monaco to ensure that you don't fall into a deep sleep. So these were some of the extreme challenges to go across the world in a solar airplane. But the point was to prove that the clean technologies, not only do they exist, but they can push to the limit. So if we can do it in the air, then surely we can do it on the ground. And so that's why today we come to this mission that I explained earlier, to find 1,000 solutions. So you ask me, okay, what are the solutions you're looking for? And sorry, I just want to show you one last picture of the plane, because this was the last picture that was taken when they landed in Abu Dhabi. And this is what it's all about. It's not about the plane that's on the background. It's about the message at the front on the sign, which says, take it further. There's no point in achieving this if we're not taking it further. And that's why now we're looking for these solutions. So if you ask me what kind of solutions we're looking for, I'll tell you any solution that is already in a one-to-one prototype or early stage commercialization, all the way to a fully commercialized solution. The reason that we look at this scope is because of the profitability aspect. So anything that's in R&D stage is too early stage, but we still encourage these kind of companies to become a member of the World Alliance and perhaps deposit their solution at a later stage. And in terms of the sectors, we use the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, and we chose 5 that were particularly pertinent, and those are the ones on the screen. The one which has to do with clean water and sanitation, then of course affordable and clean energy, industry and innovation and infrastructure. As you can imagine, a lot of the materials innovation would be covered by that. And of course, sustainability in cities and communities, So anything going from mobility solution to even Internet of Things solutions to make things more efficient, as well as waste management. And then lastly, responsible consumption and production, which also includes anything related to food production and agricultural technology. So really it's a very wide scope, but you can actually summarize it in one quick sentence. It's anything that it has a potentially viable economic model behind it and has a positive impact on the environment. So if you are a member of the World Alliance and you are an innovator, you can submit your solution, which is a process. You fill in a quite a detailed questionnaire about what your solution is and how it works and why it works, why it has an impact, etc. And we review it and then pass it on to the experts. And this is completely an independent process because we've developed this methodology with Ernst & Young, and they also audit the methodology. And we have an online platform where we match the experts with the solution in terms of their expertise. And then once the two assessments have been complete, unless there is any major questions, in which case it would go to a senior expert panel, we still do a compliance check with our compliance experts, and that's on the submitting entity, not on the solution itself. So that is quite a robust methodology, and I usually say it's not quite the due diligence that an investor would do, because of course due diligences will vary in terms of your investment strategy and will vary in terms of what your needs and focus is. But it's a very robust first pre-selection of solutions that could be potentially interesting investment opportunities. And you asked me, okay, so why do I want to label my solution? Well, because of the robust methodology, we add a layer of credibility showing that solutions are both profitable and positive, have a positive impact on the environment. But we also have, through the 20 years of solar impulse development, built up a real brand that is now famous across the world, including Bertrand Piccard, who has himself become a brand as well, using communication channels that are not only digital, but also through events where he speaks, representing the solutions that are part of the portfolio. We have that huge network that extends beyond the World Alliance for Efficient Solutions, because we also entertain institutional relationships with entities like the European Commission and the Union of the Mediterranean, the City of Paris, and all sorts of governmental, non-governmental agencies that would like to work together on implementing solutions. And then we have access to events, because one of the ways that we do our outreach is by going to events and talking to innovators. And when we do go to events, we usually negotiate with the event organizers and say, look, we have an amazing portfolio of solutions which could be incredible participants for your event. And we would like to work together. If you are able to give us a couple of free passes, we'll run a competition and encourage some of them to attend. And this is usually what we do. We are able to give some free passes for very relevant events. For example, we went to the Moving On conference in Montreal in May, which is the largest mobility conference in the world, being organized by Michelin. And we were able to give 5 free passes to our members, and also they even had a free booth, and we're able to really meet with the ecosystem of mobility through that opportunity. And then, of course, I spoke about investors, but we really want to help these solutions and these entrepreneurs to make their solutions a success. And there are also lots of investors out there that are looking for worthwhile investments that are also responsible investments. And that's why we're currently working on a much more integrated dashboard, also on the business development side, so that in several months' time, the investors will have filters to look for exactly all the different solutions in a particular sector, in a particular geography, with a particular investment ticket size, with a particular type of investment. And that's how we're really adding value to the searchability, really, of investment opportunities for investors, and also the searchability of investors for the entrepreneurs. And we're doing the same thing on the business development side, which is really all about the the solution seekers and bringing the solution seekers and the entrepreneurs together. So that's all about matchmaking and making sure that we can make sure that those relationships flourish. So now that I've explained a little bit more about the whole process, I think it's time to tell you a little bit about the solutions. And I don't have the time to go into detail of all the solutions. And just for your information, we're not at 1,000 yet. So we still have a long way to go, and we will not stop at 1,000. But we have 50 that are so far completely published on the website. We have about 400 that are currently under assessment, and we're continuing our outreach efforts to make sure that all the potential solutions that could benefit from our program can join it. So one of the solutions I want to talk to you about is Bound for Blue. This one really captured my imagination because it's really a solution that's, you know, on the one hand, very scientific, you know, sci-fi, if you look at it. But then when you hear the story behind it, you start thinking, actually, this could work. And so Bound for Blue is a Spanish company that have developed a rigid wing sail to put on existing tanker vessels, leveraging the wind on their journeys to reduce the fuel consumption. And so, I mean, a lot of people would say, well, that's ridiculous. We're not going to put sails on a tanker. But actually, there's one really important thing at play, which is that the maritime industry is one of the most polluting industries in the world, and also the most unregulated industries in the world, because, of course, a lot of these vessels go across international waters where there is not much regulation going on. And, of course, coming with emissions that are far greater than any of our diesel cars are able to produce together. And that's because of heavy fuel oil. And when you refine crude oil, you get all the different oil and gas products, including the bottom layer, which is the most coarse, the cheapest, the residue that remains at the end, which you can burn in big the big tankers, and really that's what they use. But it's incredibly polluting. But the good news is that the International Maritime Organization has said that by 2020 everybody has to move to marine gas oil, which essentially is a maritime version of diesel, which is much cleaner, but is also almost twice as expensive. And when you operate a vessel, up to 80% of your costs, of your operating costs, can be the fuel costs. So if you're going to double that in price, that's a serious problem. So this is an opportunity that Bound for Blue is leveraging, because solutions need to arise. And so what they've done is they've, through a feat of clever engineering, they've created a rigid wing sail. So it's not, you know, it's not a flexible sail. It's completely rigid, but it is foldable through a mechanical structure. And that's where the technology lies. And it's also completely automated, because it would be ridiculous to reduce fuel costs by putting something on there that needs human resources to operate. So it's completely automated, foldable in case of bad weather. So, and it can be, it can save from 10 to 40% of fuel, depending on the journey, the weather, the wind direction, and all those different conditions, but nonetheless significant. And it's also lightweight. All the materials that are used are materials that are conventionally used in the maritime industry, so there's not much fear of degradation. They're orientable to leverage the wind direction. They're very low maintenance. And actually, you have a return on investment within 5 years. So that's not too bad. And the interesting thing is that these guys have received a lot of attention, got several rounds of financing going on, and have now 2 pilot projects that are about to begin. They've done land testing, and now soon they will have some concrete prototypes on the way. One of which is a vessel, part of a fleet of 35. So if that's a success, there's a very big chance that the fleet will implement it on all its vessels. And the interesting thing is, if you implement this, you can reduce fuel consumption by over 2,000 tons a year and save €1 million a year. So that's the equivalent of basically saving, 2,500, the fuel of 2,500 diesel cars. So it's some very impressive statistics, and they're hoping to break even in 2020, 2021. So this is one of the solutions that personally I find very inspiring, and of course I hope that is going to be a big success. Another solution is called LightFi. LightFi basically has looked at the 14 billion euros of wasted funds in terms of energy consumption that's just used without being used, really. And that amounts to 42 megatons of CO2 that's emitted just because of heat, ventilation, and air conditioning and lighting. They have a very simple solution which consists of some sensor devices that are interacting with Wi-Fi. And essentially what they do is they calculate, because everybody has a smartphone these days and everybody has a Wi-Fi signal coming from their smartphones unless they're switching their Wi-Fi off, but usually they don't, which means that you can track how many people are in the building just on the basis of a Wi-Fi signal coming through. And through some plug-and-play installation, they're able to create something that doesn't require any rewiring, that's long range, has a very low return on investment period, only less than 1 year, and allows you to control heat, ventilation, and air conditioning in a completely optimized way, with incredible results because of that. So the Cambridge University did a test where this was installed, and it was not across the whole of the university, but just in a 200 square meter auditorium. And you can see that the energy used before is drastically higher than the energy used after. Lights were never left on overnight. There was a 57% saving in energy, and equivalent of 3 tons of CO2 saved only in this one auditorium. So you can imagine that if something as simple as a plug-and-play device with a few sensors is able to give you these kinds of saving, I mean, it's a no-brainer. Same for ventilation, 41% savings, 2.2 tons of CO2 saved. And what's even more interesting is that these impacts are not only on the energy consumption, but they're highly impactful on the productivity of the staff. So you can see that you have the famous afternoon slump where people, after lunch, they kind of lose their productivity, they get a bit tired, they kind of fall asleep. And the lack of the lack of productivity is also because the air quality tends to be the weakest in a building in the middle of the day when most people are present. So based on the amount of people, the ventilation is increased or decreased, optimizing the air temperature, optimizing the air quality, and really increasing or at least avoiding a 29% loss in productivity. There are some studies that show that actually in some periods of the day, productivity is actually halved, which essentially means if you have 50 employees working for you, they're really doing the work of 25 employees. So again, with a simple plug-and-play device, able to both reduce your energy costs, but also improve the productivity of your workforce is incredibly powerful. So here are just a few, a few figures on your return on investment. And if you look at, of course, depending on the situation, if you have a return on investment that is, just a year and a few months, that's an incredible investment. So it's really a no-brainer to install something like that. Now another solution I want to talk to you about is Voodoo. Voodoo is a French company which have set as its mission to redesign, re-engineer the next generation of advanced wood materials to really revolutionize the building industry and make a much more sustainable material to use in the construction of facades. And currently, a lot of glass and a lot of steel is used, which of course is much more intensive in the production and the CO2 emissions. And actually, if you look at the building materials market, you've got a 12 trillion building materials market with wood construction being a total addressable market of about 313 billion. And then in that, you have engineered wood, which is only still a fraction. So there's an enormous potential for growth, especially if you consider that the materials industry currently emits 2.5 billion tons of CO2 every year. And of course, the wood alternative is 100% renewable and 100% carbon neutral. And if you ensure that you use sustainable forests and sustainable planting programs to source the wood, then it's, of course, a win-win. But another interesting fact that inspired this young architect from France to start this company is the fact that in France, 50% of the wood that's being chopped down every year is being piled up into stacks in the forests and left to rot away, not being used for anything at all. So essentially, there's a huge loss of materials, a lost opportunity right there. And the product that they've designed allows you to upgrade the wood and make it into something usable and useful. So what they're doing is taking wood and then looking at the cell walls of wood. Essentially, there's a lot of air. There's a polymer called lignin, which has a lot of air in it. At least if they extract that, they're able to fill it with a bio-based polymer that they've designed themselves, which then fills these gaps and creates a new kind of wood. A wood 2.0, you could say. And that wood has some very, very interesting properties. So you have, firstly, it's translucent, which is highly interesting for the interior design industry, for example. It's weatherproof, which is sort of a must if you're using it in construction. But it's also three times stronger than conventional wood, fireproof, and it is able to upgrade low-grade wood. So again, wood that normally would be left to rot away suddenly gets a second lease on life through this process. And in his idealistic vision, if he says that the past centuries have been the centuries of steel and concrete, he hopes that the 21st century is going to be the age of wood again. So this is just a little few examples on a couple of solutions, and I'd invite you to go to our website and look at the various solutions that have so far been labeled. But I also want to invite you to, of course, join the ecosystem and contribute to it in any way you can. And this is how you can do that. You can become a member, which is completely free of charge. And as a member, you can either say you're an investor or an innovator or a seeker, or you can tick all of these, because sometimes you are all of these. And as an innovator, you are able to submit a solution within the profile that you create and submit that for assessment to get the Solar Impulse label, if that is something that would be of value to you. But you can also, as an investor, look at the solutions that we have so far put online, and if there are any that interest you or you would like to know more about because you think it would be a worthwhile investment, then we are very happy to put you in touch. And again, these are things we do free of charge because we don't charge for any of our services. And that's the beauty of our model, because we have the funding that is already taken care of. So we're only looking for win-win situations. And then lastly, we also are constantly looking for experts, because the assessment process, with an increasing number of solutions that are being deposited, is quite an intense one. And so if there is any expertise in any of the SDG fields, and if you or people you know have at least 5 years of experience in those fields, you can also contact us and you can be onboarded as an expert. You can create a profile, there's an onboarding webinar, and then it's really very much like an Airbnb or Uber model where you get matched, but you never have to accept. You only do that if you're interested, if you have the time, because we also realize that we can't expect people to always give up their time at any point in time. They have to be in control of what they want to do. So some experts do one solution a week, other experts do one solution every 2 months. It's completely up to you. But these are some meaningful ways in which you can contribute to this movement, to this initiative. And I'd be very happy to answer any questions and welcome you into the Solar Impulse ecosystem, because I think we can do so much more together. Thank you very much. Ashish, back to you.
Thank you, William, for this wonderful, detailed presentation on all your activities and what you have. So William has just gave an introduction about Solar Impulse, what the foundation is having a vision to achieve 1,000 solutions. He has also gave few examples of 2-3 most innovative solutions, which because they cannot show all the products, but as he is explaining that already there are 400 to 500 solutions which are under consideration as of now to on the process. So thank you, William, for this wonderful presentation of yours. Then now I'll ask you a few questions to go ahead.
Sure.
William, there is one question which is from Siddharth. He is from India. He is having a little bit concern. It's not more of a question, it's just a concern you can have. So he is asking how long till we will see electric vehicles as mainstream. Now the ones that are commercially viable are either too costly or too inconvenient to use, mostly in developing nations. Why don't these big companies not using cells that Tesla uses? It has been ages since we have not advanced enough in battery technologies. Do you have any comments for this?
So was your question about how long it's going to take to be mainstream? Is that
yes?
Was that the question?
How long it will take to be mainstream, and also is there any apprehensions that few new technologies is going to disrupt the market going forward, at least in the storage space?
So I think that there's definitely a very, very strong push for EVs going on at the moment, and I think India, for example, has really made a case in point. I think it was 2030 that they envision all the EVs sold to be all the automobiles sold to be electric. So there's a strong political will to move to electric, which is accelerating the change. But of course, there are some very strong infrastructural issues, because that you need to have all these charging stations that are being installed. So I think we're getting there, because I'll give it another 2 years before we get electric vehicles that actually have ranges that are convenient for us. Right now, it's still too limiting unless you're driving a Tesla. But I think the one crucial thing is that the energy mix in terms of the auto industry is going to be evolving as well. So I think there's going to be a huge trend which is going to be shared mobility. I know everybody's talking about it already, but it's especially with the autonomous vehicles coming up, it really makes really puts the whole question of ownership at the forefront. Why would you own a vehicle if you can make use of services to go from A to B, and essentially having almost a public transportation system that is replaced by autonomous vehicles driving as sort of Uber-like entities without drivers. So that's one of the things, but also hydrogen fuel cells technology is really coming into the mix. There are a couple of our members who are very busy developing infrastructure and technology for that. In particular, also in the forklift drivers industry, sorry, the forklift truck industry. So those are very fertile testing grounds for hydrogen fuel cell solutions. And I think that in the future, it's not like we're going to have either or. It's going to be a true mix of all these things. Actually, in the meantime, there are also some very interesting transitionary technologies. One of our members, for example, has developed a device that can be implemented on diesel cars, injecting hydrogen into the combustion chamber and actually creating a much more complete combustion, and therefore reducing the emissions of the car. So those are technologies that are retrofittable on existing diesel cars whilst we are waiting for the transition to be completed. So I don't know if that answers your question to some extent, but I think, to be a bit concrete, I think give it another 2 years before we get before we get cars that are actually practical to drive, and then we'll probably need another few years to really get it mainstream in the sense. But I think that if you look at 2025, the electrical vehicle market will be huge.
Okay, so Siddharth, as per William, by 2025, this market is going to be really huge and solving a lot of and bringing a lot of change, at least in the transportation sector. William, there is another question for you. He is Nadeem from Dubai. What he is asking is, what is the timeline to get the recognition once we apply at Solar Impulse?
Okay, so that's a good question, Nadeem. Essentially, it depends on several things. It depends on how quickly you're matched to experts. It depends on how available the experts are, and then it depends on whether there are any issues with your assessment or not. Essentially, it can be as quick as 2 weeks, but it's also happened that we've, for example, Bound for Blue that I showed you had to wait for 1 or 2 months because we had an issue finding the right experts for that specific case in point. If the experts are already on our panel, then there's no problem at all. But sometimes we come across solutions that are so innovative that we really need to go at lengths to find experts that are able to assess these solutions. But I think a fair estimate would be to say anything between 2 and 5 weeks. So that's essentially about the time that it takes. Yeah. And then, of course, one thing that I do need to mention, if for example, you fill in the assessment form and it's not complete, then we'll give you feedback as to how to make it more complete, and you get another 2 weeks to amend it. So that sometimes adds some time to the procedure, but it also allows you to submit as complete as possible a submission.
Okay, great. There are another 2 questions we'll take. I know that William, there are a lot of questions, and another question is from John Karuna. He's from Sri Lanka, and what he's asking, I am an entrepreneur from Sri Lanka. My company focuses on agriculture. Is there any solutions that Solar Impulse has come up on smart agricultural practices?
So I don't believe that we have, as to date, any solutions that really pertain to smart agriculture. It's because I'm assuming that by smart agriculture you mean sort of the IoT type solutions where you really integrate sensors and communication devices into the agricultural practices. But there have been some solutions which are using the manure of tilapia to create feed for livestock and things like that in the agricultural space. So we do have a couple of agriculturally related solutions, but I'm not not confident today that we have any that is really about smart agriculture. But those will surely come and join the ecosystem. And if you do have a solution yourself in that space, then I very much welcome you to join us and submit the solution. And if you have any issues, if you have any questions as to whether your solution fits within the scope, we can always do a quick check with the solutions team to make sure that you're not wasting your time and that you make sure that you're within the scope and that you have the maximum of chances to get the label.
Okay, great. William, then I will ask you one question from my end. So while selecting the solutions to be recognized or get solar impulse label, so what is your priority one? Is it a return on investment, or how much impact it is giving to the nature? Which is your priority one, or is it a scale of scores which you normally give while choosing?
So when you mean in terms of the criteria?
Yes. So that people will have an idea whether their solutions actually qualify to be labeled or not.
So these criteria are equally important, and they need to have a sufficient grade to pass on both, and then it needs to be a high enough average as well. So we really look at both of them. So if we have one that's completely sustainable, but we cannot find any evidence of a business model, it doesn't pass. If we have something that is a very good business model, but doesn't have an impact that is provable or quantifiable, at least to some extent, then we often give you the feedback. In fact, if even if somebody doesn't pass the assessment, they still get the feedback from the experts, and sometimes it means that the impact is not yet quantifiable, and therefore it means it's a too early a stage. So sometimes the feedback might be, you need to wait another year and make sure you're able to really identify how you're making an impact on the environment before you can prove it. So it's not, we're not trying to tell people you don't qualify, so you're out. We very often tell people how they can improve and invite people to reapply once they've sorted those things out.
Okay, great. One last question, William, before we stop taking more questions. So it is more of a little bit India specific. He's from Aniket from India, most specifically from Kolkata. He's asking that what are the main comprehensive policies needed or need to change in existing policies by the government to achieve sustainable energy development goals?
Wow, that's a that's a hell of a question. I think that I'm not a policy expert, and we have a public affairs team that really focuses on that. If you're really interested, I can always ask some more information. But very often it's about incentivizing the right practices. So putting a tax on the things that are not desirable and giving subsidies to those that we do want to mobilize, I think is a very good system, because you really very often have a situation where something is potentially profitable, but then the implementation has a high investment cost, and the ROI, if it's too long, then people may not do it. The other issue is, for example, with solar panels, there's very often an issue of home ownership. If you're renting a house, what's your incentive to put solar panels on the roof? So in the Netherlands, for example, we're seeing movements that are, we're seeing legislations that's moving towards systems where the solar panel installation is linked to the house, and no matter what. So if you are an owner and you sell the house, then people are paying also for that installation, and it's transferable. So in that sense, that you can make the investment without the worry of how long are you going to be living there, or there's an incentive essentially for everyone to do it. So I think those kinds of nudges are incredibly powerful to bear in mind. So I think that's all I can say about this at the moment. But if you have more questions, I can certainly reach out to the public affairs team.
Okay, great. Thank you, William, for this wonderful, and we'll not take more questions now. Extra questions I'll be mailing it to William for a later if when he has found time. He'll respond to that. Thank you everyone for joining in the webinar today. Hopefully we are able to give a lot of details from William regarding how you can actually be involved, giving your solutions, getting a level, also become an investor. For more specifically for investment opportunity, you can directly connect with William or with us, so that we can help you to channelize the things. Thank you everyone, and again, whenever if you want to be a partner or speaker, a sponsor at with Greenomix World, do write to us at webinars@greenomixworld.com, and to give you a more focused way that we are coming up with a PVSys, which is one of the most used software in the solar industry. We are coming up with a comprehensive digital training program on PVSys. So stay tuned to us through LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, so that you will get all the details. And again, thank you, William, for this wonderful session, and thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think PVSys maybe should also become a member of the World Alliance.
Yes, sure, sure. We will soon. I'll connect with you surely.
Well, thank you all, and I hope to see you in the World Alliance. And please visit solarimpulse.com and all the